And it was awesome because like he'd start hunching over more, he'd start getting his hands out, start using his tongue, and start Spider-Man. I was just like, I was so happy when he got to it that I was like, this is gonna be fantastic.
Thank you so much for taking the time to chat to me. Spider-Man on PS1 is an absolute favourite of mine back in the day. I was very excited to see it has a big anniversary this year. I mean, yes, it'll be 25 years on the 30th of August since it launched. Did you think that the game would last so long in the memory we'd still be talking about it all these years later?
Not at all. So back then, like I was so early in my career, I was really happy just to be working on a game like this. But and I know I've been lucky with a lot of the games I got to work on over the years, but I knew at the time like this was a once in a lifetime opportunity. Like bringing Spidey to 3D, like who gets to do that? 3D games were in general kind of new, and even characters walking around was generally pretty janky. And I think Superman 64 was around the same time, so superhero games were getting started. So I was just like, I just wanted to make sure we did the source material justice and made a good game. And I was happy that we ended up serving both really well, I think, for the most part, and setting a good baseline for like Spidey games and superhero games in general. But I was not expecting it still to be beloved, but I love that. It makes me really happy.
Awesome, I bet. What are your memories of how the project came together and you ended up kind of getting the license in the first place?
So how we got working on Spidey, we had just finished working on Apocalypse, and our company wanted to do two games simultaneously because we wanted to maximize our chances of like being able to pop as a developer. We were still relatively new as a developer, and so I had just finished helping on the prototyping of Tony Hawk, and I moved on to our second team. And Activision had the Star Trek license at the time, so I was actually working on a 7 of 9 Voyager game. We had 7 of 9 running through the hallways of Voyager with a firing a phaser rifle. When my boss, he had heard that Activision got the Spidey license, and he was talking to a few of us, and I was like, dude, I am a huge Spidey fan. And I think he also knew that like Spidey had a higher potential than the Star Trek game that we were going to potentially work on. So he went after it, and he's a really hard person to say no to. And so we got it. And then so we moved off of Star Trek and right onto Spidey and got to work.
Amazing. And you kind of touched on this already there, but how big of a Spider-Man fan were you before that, and how did that kind of inform how you kind of jumped onto the project?
So no joke, during the 90s, I probably read every single issue of every single Spidey title that was out, and most of the Marvel and DC major characters as well. But like Spidey, like he talked to me. He was a nerd. I was a nerd. He had a hard time talking to girls. I had a hard time talking to girls. Like he studied tech stuff. I was studying tech stuff. And so for me, that was like, I wanted to take those pages that like I got to read through and bring them to the gamer. Experience him the same way I got to meet the characters the same way I got to hear them the way I kind of thought they sounded, and bring that lore to the players. And so it heavily influenced how I developed the game.
Awesome. And do you have any kind of personal favorite moments from the game, or favorite kind of memories of kind of things clicking and coming together and stuff like that?
Yeah. Because of the goals that I had of like really bringing that Spidey stuff to life, like even that first level when you're in the bank and you're on the ceiling looking down on the bank robbers, Jade Syndicate, like for me that was like all of it coming together. And like it's paying homage to the source material, to his powers. It's good gameplay. It's fun. And so that was like really like made me proud. Like when people are enjoying that, or also like when Mysterio goes from being like the imposter to this huge mini like boss you're gonna play, like that stuff's straight out of the comic books. And so like being able to do that stuff and bring it to the players who had no idea what this stuff was like and make them go, oh, this is what it's like. Like those are the kind of things that I look back to so fondly.
Things like you said, like having that perspective of like crawling on the ceiling kind of sounds so simple when you say it, but I'm sure it hadn't been done a million times before.
It was so much work, and especially like we only used that very specific camera view from the ceiling like a little bit. And so like every single level that we worked on, I wanted to use Spidey's powers in a fun way and a different way each time too. And so that was like, all right, what are we gonna do here? Well, the best version of this would be, so we wrote custom code just for that, because we really wanted to pay homage and make it feel like this is a whole new issue of Spidey using his powers in a different way.
That is so cool. And speaking of, the comics themselves, you have that amazing Stan Lee narration. Do you remember how important that was to you wanted to get that? Do you remember how it happened? Did you think was it a long shot, do you think, to get it?
So I said like I was a huge Spidey nerd. So Stan used to write these yellow box intros to the issues he would do, and he would be like a little like wet the palette, like like sneak peek into what's about to happen in that issue or what might have happened a little bit in the past one. But it was something to get the reader excited about the issue they're about to read, and I wanted that for the game because I wanted like the people to really get the feeling of it. And so Activision went after and said, "Hey, do you want to do this?" He said yes. And man, that dude was fantastic. Like, he was a super fun guy. He knew what we were going for. He made fun of my writing because I stole from him so much on my style. But like every part of working with that dude was awesome.
I imagine you didn't have him for a super long time.
No, it was only a day or two. But it was cherished. Like I remember those days so super fondly. It's one of my best development days.
Awesome. And you mentioned that you'd worked on Tony Hawk a little bit before this. Was there much kind of crossover between the projects? Did working on one inform the other, that kind of thing?
Yeah, so the engines themselves diverged very quickly. Tony Hawk games are like super focused on 60 frames a second, and like that control and animation systems are super linked. Like you have to have snap-on controls. Whereas the Spidey game is much broader. We had larger levels, we had web swinging, wall crawling, walking, fighting, AI, trigger systems. And so technically they diverged very quickly. That said, they finished Tony Hawk 1 and it released in the early stages of us working on Spidey. And like, as you know, like Tony's just a fun game to play. You can play Tony in like a gray box with just like one pool and a couple things to trick on, and you're having fun. And so my boss, Joel, was like, just get Spidey like to be fun to swing with, fun to wall crawl with, and fun to fight with in a box. And so that was our start, just getting it fun. And then we could layer on like the story and the lore and the characters and the bosses and the powers and all that kind of stuff. But like getting it fun just to play in a box came straight from like what we learned on the Tony games.
Nice. And definitely the swinging, I remember being such a cool kind of way that you realized it. And I remember even at the time, I was kind of quite a young person at the time, but I remember finding it not necessarily funny, but the idea that you had my reading of the fact you kind of had the poisonous fog across the floor was that, we're not going to make the ground. You can stay up here. Don't worry about what's down there.
Yeah, so that fog, that was, I'm sorry to say, that was a development woes fix. I don't like doing that very often, but like we were developing the game. Like I knew, Spidey being a kid from Queens, New York, we had to have New York in the game. But I didn't want to just, focus on New York as being like, the level you're in. Like the issues. Spidey's a major comic book character, and he goes a lot of different places and deals with a lot of different cool environments and all that. And I wanted to mimic that in the game. And so once we made the decision not to do an open world New York, we had to go, all right, so what are we doing down there? Because I didn't want even the gameplay down there, because he's a swinger, he's swinging and wall crawl and all that. And so option was like, do a fully realized street level, but like we were so tight on VRAM already, our characters took up most of that, and like the draw distance was already a huge pain in the butt for us. It's like, all right, let's not do that. We even then prototyped like a mini version of the street level stuff with like little tiny cars and all that kind of stuff. But we still had to come up with like a really, like if you got down there, like outside mission area, mission failed. Like we didn't want to do that area. That's not fun. So then we're like, all right, well, what else can we do? And I can't remember who came up with the idea of it, but it's like, what if we did a story caveat that solved this problem? And so that's what we did.
One thing I wasn't super aware of at the time, when you're a kid, you have your version of a game and you kind of assume that's what everyone's got. But when I was kind of writing up the questions for this, I realized the game was on not just PlayStation, also Game Boy and 64, Dreamcast, Windows, and Mac. How different were all those versions, and how complicated was it to launch on so many platforms around that time?
I didn't deal with that aspect of it all that much. Like, because we were working on 2 games simultaneously, like Tony 1 and 2, and then Spidey. We were super, like, we were super tight with our staff at Neversoft, and so from what I remember, we did not do any of the port work at all. We outsourced all of it because we wanted to make sure that core game was exactly what we envisioned it to be, and so we did not do any of the porting. We did reviews on them every once in a while, but like, again, like, our schedule was so tight, like, I was head to the ground on the game, and so I didn't deal with that all that much.
No, that makes sense. I was thinking, like, surely they can't have the same people been making so many different games in such a quick time.
We did jump into that later into Neversoft futures just because of, like, for monetary reasons and all that, but like, you need to have a really robust team to be able to do that.
Yeah, I bet. This is maybe scrolling back slightly, but how did you go about deciding on the storyline and which villains you wanted to pull in? Was it like, well, these are my faves and I want them in there, or the ones that you felt you hadn't seen before and stuff?
Yeah, so I had, like, when I was early in development on the game, I had like 4 tiers of characters. Like, the like, we have to have these guys. We really should have these guys. It'd be nice to have these guys. And yeah, we could use these guys. And so I came up with that and submitted the entire list to Marvel. And it was like a page and a half long. It was a long list. And except for maybe 2 or 3, they approved all of them and didn't, like, without any like way of like how they were going to get used or anything like that. And I think, and the 2 and the 3 that didn't get used, I think were only not approved because they had maybe games getting slated for themselves as well. I think like Wolverine was one, and I can't remember what the other ones were. But so once I had that, I was like, all right, cool. And so, like, my must-haves like were Venom, Black Cat, MJ, and Doc Ock. Like, because those were like, Venom was new and like super fun to do and could work both sides of the, like, good bad side, and Doc Ock was such a staple Spidey character. And then MJ and Black Cat, like, I wanted to have like the friend side and the raise stakes, And then I had like the list of like, we really should have like Carnage and Rhino, because they were also like super good for the Spidey franchise and good for the game. And so once I had that, I started laying out like, how is Venom potentially going to get used, like switching and all that. And then with characters like Rhino, like, once we had a basic story for how the major characters would use, like, all right, we could use a boss fight here, and we'd work backwards from both sides to get like the Rhino in. And so we just worked that way once, like, with that prioritized list from the top.
Nice. I just had a flashback of the Rhino boss fight. I was stuck on that one for a little while, I think.
Yeah, that one took a while to learn, but it was super fun. That one, also, it started out way more complex than it ended up being in the game.
Nice. And your version of Venom, I also remember so vividly. I think it's like one of the kind of earliest versions of that character I remember seeing in like another media, and the voice as well, just so just captured.
Man,
so well.
Darren Norris, he voiced Venom. That was like, doing the voice stuff for this game was one of my biggest joys ever. But Darren Norris in particular, like, we auditioned him and hired him, and then he and I sat down and talked about the character, went through the books. And then we just started working on the voice together. And it was awesome because, like, he'd start hunching over more. He'd start getting his hands out, start using his tongue, and start Spider-Man. I was just like, I was so happy when he got to it that I was like, this is going to be fantastic. And he loved playing the character too. So it just made it a joy to work with. And I think it's part of why, like, the game is loved, because you can tell that these people, like, these actors, put everything into the characters.
Definitely. And some of them I don't know if inherited is the right word, but some of them had also appeared in the animated show of that era as well, right?
Yeah. I think Doc Ock came from that, and I think Jennifer Hale was in it too. We definitely, I definitely took some of the performance inspiration from that series, but as far as like the actual like game itself, like, because I was such a nerd of the books, like, all the inspiration came straight from the books. Like, there's so much good material out there. I didn't want it filtered in any way. I wanted to go straight from there right to the players.
Definitely. And the one, if I was going to pick out one kind of gameplay moment that has really stuck with me It is, I believe, the final boss battle, the bit where Carnage and Doc Ock have kind of merged, and it's almost like Indiana Jones-ish in a way, or Crash Bandicoot-ish, when it's like you're kind of having to swing towards the screen and they're coming up behind you. It's like, how did you land on that, and how was it making it?
Yeah, I loved making that because it felt like such a comic booky thing to do, of merging these two characters to make a super evil character, but it was ours, it was our idea, and that made me really happy. We came up with the idea to do that fairly early on in the process. Like, once we had the major beats for the story, like I wanted to make sure we had a good finale. Like, I don't like when like movies and games kind of limp into the end, like you have this really good game and then it just kind of falls off at the end because you're like, oh, you're finished. And so that felt like a really good way to end the game. But we didn't start working on that until like the very, 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 very like plane on fire, we need to land now end. And that was scary, but it also was kind of cool because at that point, like I said, like we wanted to use Spidey's powers in all different ways in every single mission. We had the controls really dialed in at that point. And I knew Monster Rock was supposed to be like this super dangerous, super fast. And so what could we do? And I was like, oh, the zip lining was a great way to move Spidey really fast. And so I started prototyping like this, this tube level of like a square chasing Spidey through it using the zip lines to escape. And immediately I was like, oh, this is a good thing. Like this could work to really, crescendo. Like we add like all the voices and the sound effects and the explosions all the way to the end. And it just ended up working really well. And it made me super happy that we were able to make that succeed.
Oh, you definitely did. There's something about like the combination of things you just described. It was just like pure tension, is what I remember. Like if you mess up by like a few seconds, then.
But it wasn't so long that it was like a huge pain in the. I feel like it's probably, if I played it right now, I'd probably get super frustrated. But.
I was wondering another thing that like I think part of the reason I remember that you had this is because me and my friend used to try and do the different voices. Is that you have the option for kid mode on the menu. And that was one of those things like, I think more games should have a kid mode, if it was a common thing at the time, or if that was something that you came up with.
No, it wasn't a common thing at all. It was my boss, Joel. His kid would come by the studios quite often, and he wanted to play the game. Superhero games in particular, especially if you're sticking to the aesthetics of the comics, are like, kids love that kind of thing. And also the themes of them tend to be, unless you're getting too dark with the choices you make, are like really fun for kids. But it was just too hard to control, especially like even then, like the D-pad didn't have the analog sticks even. So like trying to control Spidey with that complexity of controls was just not going to happen for kids. And so when my boss was like, we have an opportunity to make this thing accessible to this like whole age group, and so that's how kid mode got started. And we and we did whatever we could without like destroying our schedule to make that more fun to play.
Definitely. I just remember because when you hovered over it on the menu, it would do a different voice every time. So it's like kid mode.
Kid mode. Kid mode.
Kid mode.
Kid mode.
Kid mode.
Kid mode.
Awesome. Also, you mentioned Jennifer Hale earlier. I only realised when I was kind of doing some research for this interview that that she was Black Cat in this. One of my other favourite games was Knights of the Old Republic, and she's one of the main characters in that as well. There's this kind of behind-the-scenes things you realise. There's actually some crossover between that you wouldn't have noticed at the time necessarily.
Yeah, she was awesome. She's one of the best voice actors I've ever worked with. She's like super versatile, and she gets what the goal is of the game immediately. And so she jumps right in and does it like super quickly. And like, like because I really want to just bring that, like what I heard the voices being like to the player, like it was just awesome to work with an entire cast that was all on board, like her, like Romano, like he just jumped into the Spidey role from the get-go and just did it, Black Cat, like he was like super perfect with the way he would do the voices. And so all of them together just made it so much fun to try to bring this thing to the players.
I've never really thought of it before, but like, it sounds like you had to do a lot of kind of envisioning in your head what the voices would sound like, and then trying to communicate that out loud mustn't be the easiest thing.
It wasn't easy, but it was like it was just super fun. Like I love a challenge like that where you're trying to fit the peg in the hole, and it's just like, all right, that's not gonna work. That's not like, the Carnage voice was like a particularly interesting one to try to do. D. Bradley Baker was the guy that voiced him, and so we sat down for like probably a couple hours working through his characters to really dial that in. But it's just fun to do if you kind of like, what you like, what you're kind of going for, and then these super talented people are working with you to give you the best version of it, and you guys come together with it. It's an awesome process.
Nice. No, it sounds really cool. One thing I wanted to ask you about, kind of on a different tact, was do you have any like strong memories of content that you had to kind of cut along the way? There's a couple of things I read about online, something about a lizard boss fight or another Venom fight. Were there things you were like, oh, I wish we'd got that in, or that you were kind of glad that you didn't get in? Or...
Well, I mean, like, of course, there's like part of me like cried when we had to cut them, because I was super invested in the potentials of the game. That said, like, Neversoft has always been an extremely schedule-driven company, and like right from the get-go, Joel, my boss, is like very explicit about like, here's the cut line, and these are the things that are already looking like they're on the edge of that. And like Lizard and Vulture and the Venom bridge fight were all those things. And so the only things I remember specifically about them, because I didn't spend a lot of cycles on them, because I knew if they were potentially going to get cut, I did not want to waste cycles on that. I wanted to make sure we got what we were for sure getting the game done, and then if I have time, I'll immediately like work 20 hours a day trying to get those other things in if we had time. The Venom fight on the bridge was the one I had the most thoughts about, and like I do remember like some drawings I did for that with like one of you guys on the top part of the bridge, and the other guy on the street level, and like somebody was throwing a car at the other person. And while that sounds kind of cool, I think it would have been too much work to get done in the end. The Lizard one, the only thing I remember about that was like him fighting with a bunch of his minions, and while I'm kind of bummed that one didn't make it in, I'm probably glad it didn't, because like to do a boss fight with minions is really hard to not be frustrating. Like when you have minions kind of distracting you against your goal of defeating the boss, that can get really freaking irritating. And so doing a good version of that one would have taken time. And then the last one, the Vulture, of course, adding a flying enemy would have been awesome, but like, with a game that's been dealing with like sight level enemies the entire time, I had no idea what that was going to be. And so that's why I think that's how it ended up at the end as well, because like we're like, oh, I don't think that one's going to be an easy one to get done.
No, it sounds like you'd thought it all through in advance, which is good. The worst is when you start working on something and you've got like halfway through, and then you have to...
I've had to deal with that far too many times, and so I do not like ripping things out that like get like halfway done.
Fair. One thing, again, when you're a kid, you don't necessarily think in these terms, but do you remember at all like how successful the game was? Was it like a huge sales hit? The fact that I had it and my friend I was talking to today also had it, I know it feels like everyone had this game. I don't know how many units or anything like that.
Because I was just the lead designer at the time, I was not privy to sales info. I knew it did enough, like it made its money back, and so I know it was financially successful. By how much, I actually don't know. And I kind of like enjoyed those days of not knowing the numbers, because it was just pure like, let's make fun stuff. And so that part of I didn't know. And then the part I did know was like critically, like it was in a lot of reviews and reviewed well. And that's where I was like, our goal was to do the game and the source material justice, and especially like I said, like a lot of like kind of janky 3D stuff was coming out at the time. And we are like, this is something that was really solid. And so that part of it just made me really happy.
There's such a good combination as well, like kind of, I think you said this near the start, that as a character and with that kind of 3D technology, there's like a perfect match, probably more so than trying to make the Star Trek game.
Absolutely, yeah. The Star Trek game would have been fine, but like this was a real challenge, and it challenged us like across the board. But I think it also helped steel us as a company, even just being able to take these challenges and get through them in a very efficient but fun way, and worked well for us.
Nice. One thing I didn't realize until I was planning this, that the second game moved over to a different studio. How do you remember why it was kind of a one and done thing for you guys, or just other things getting in the way and stuff?
Yeah, I was definitely bummed that we didn't do Spidey 2, but the reason was that we are moving on to PlayStation 2, and the Tony Hawk games are on 1 year's dev cycles, no matter what, at the time, and so we knew to get a Tony Hawk game on a new engine done in a year, it was all hands on deck, and like just to get the engine done was all hands on deck, but then also whenever you make a console jump, with the number of new details you're doing, like the scale of textures, the new like number of animations, like just the number of assets that like jump in your game go up like tenfold with every console jump. And so we knew the work was gonna be tremendous just to get one game done. And so we had the choice, like, Spidey or Tony, and Tony was the studio's baby. And I don't regret the decision. I'm bummed I never got a chance to work on another Spidey game, but like it's just the need to make the next Tony is why.
Fair, absolutely fair. What has it been like for you seeing the Tony games kind of be remastered and re-released in recent years? That must be a weird thing to see your own work kind of get redone again.
I love it. I designed the airport and Los Angeles levels for Tony Hawk 3, and I did the college level for Tony Hawk 4. And so for me, like being able to bomb through those levels again and like, find the secret tape and get 6 score and, do the earthquake and, stop the pickpockets who originally were terrorists, and we had to change that. Seeing all that stuff and be able to play through it again, I think they did a great job, and I love playing through it.
Nice. I was playing the new version of the airport level the other day. That is a great level. So long.
It was one that like I don't want to say I was lucky. I knew what I had as my goals of like the low and high lines and being kind of a linear level, but also being able to play it in loops. And I got paired with a really good artist, Darren. And we just crammed through that thing just with a really singular goal of like creating this like downhill looping level. And I'm just stoked it worked out so well.
Definitely. One thing I had written down to ask you about is this, unless you've kind of still got an old copy, this Spider-Man game isn't super easy to access through, so shall we say, legal means these days. Why is that? And my assumption would be, licenses expire and things like that.
That one also I very little insight in. I don't know if I would have known more if I'd been higher up on the food chain at the time or not, but I don't know if it's a Marvel thing, an Activision thing, a licensing thing, a return on investment to support it. I don't know. It's a bummer too for me because I like being able to go back and play some of the old stuff every once in a while, but I have no clue about that one.
Fair, absolutely fair. Would you like to see it get a remaster or a re-release or something like that?
Yes and no. So the only reason I'd like to see this game get remastered is I love when comic book source material gets brought to like TV, movies and TVs and games and really sticks to what made the source material so special. And that's really like uncommon these days. Most times you got execs saying, oh yeah, but we want it to be gritty and realistic, or, we want the gameplay to be long enough, so we need to do open world for it, which then limits the number of places that you can go. And so I think the new Fantastic Four and Superman movies, I think they both actually stick to the source material very well, and it makes me really happy because that's like a big risk for a lot of these things, but it turns out well. But most people don't take that kind of risk, and so if a company were to remaster this, I would love it for that reason. But if they're going with that goal in the first place, hey, I'd want to see new stuff come off anyway, because I love that source material so much. I want to play new stuff, and so that's the only reason. 6 of one, half the other doesn't, on that one.
I was wondering if you've kept up with Spider-Man games over the years, and if you've had any thoughts on the more recent ones that Insomniac have been doing.
I play most of them a bit because I love the source material. And what I really love about them is the way they have really enhanced the mechanics of them. I think the swinging system in particular, that's really difficult to do. Just because it's guessing what you want so much. more than like almost like flying or fighting or anything. It's like it's trying to guess what you're trying to do so much, and that's so difficult. And so to make it so amazing to look at and play and feel, it's I love what they've done with that, and the aerial combat they've added. Like that's really fun because that is so core Spidey and different from so many other characters. I love what they've done mechanics wise, and so I jump into them and I play them. But like I said, I'm more of a linear mission kind of guy because I love the way like episodic features that could be done that way. So I miss that part of it, but like mechanics wise, I'm always astounded with the way these things have been evolving.
Definitely. One thing, I was chatting to a friend of mine in the office today, and he was, I've got to ask him about the different suits. And I was like, oh, I forgot you had so many cool different suits, and you had the paper bag suit in there. It's a favorite of mine. Again, I guess that was like just drawing on your personal, what ones that you loved, right?
Yeah, that one again was like, and I think we still had to run all those by a Marvel just to make sure that was all okay to do, but they said yes to all of them. And so like the books are so special, and I love that kind of like uniqueness of it, and the characters like the Ben Reilly and the Silver Suit and the Marvel, like the Captain Marvel Marvel version of it. Like all of them were like played differently. Amazing Bagman. He didn't have his stuff with him, so I just like, this is just a great opportunity to let people experience what was there that was already amazing.
Awesome. And I guess just to round things off, would you kind of have any kind of message or thoughts for fans that are still thinking about this game and loving it after all this time, 25 years?
It makes me happy that people loved what we took from the original like books and put out there, and that we did a good enough job with the controls. Like there's definitely issues with it still, but like that was that was step one into like going into a completely new area. We're going blind into this, and so I think we did a good job with getting that first step for superhero games and Spidey in particular to be accessible to people and enjoy it. And I just love that people reacted to it so well, and it makes me very happy. And very happy that like maybe we'll see some of these loops happening again where that really gets embraced and we get to see that core material come back again.
So that'd be great. Well, Chad, thank you so much for chatting. Love the game. Thank you so much for making it back in the day. Definitely me and my friends love playing it, and it's been lovely to meet you. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. You too, and I hope you have a wonderful day.
Awesome. Me too.